Okay, perfect. So today I'm going to go over contract to close. So we're basically going to, at this point, assume that you have a contract under contract. So either Cody, you've been through a couple deals. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. I want to make sure that we cover any questions that you guys have or that you've seen real life, because I'm going to go over some checklists, but sometimes real life doesn't follow a checklist perfectly, right? So I'm going to cover that. So I'm also going to start by showing you guys where we hold our resources and where we're going to hold this checklist. So if you haven't done this yet, I'm going to share my screen. We definitely want you, can everybody see my screen?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so we definitely want you guys to create a Home Hub account. So you're going to go here to, it's kwhomehubagent.com. We have moved all of our coaching resources on here. So the idea of this this hub is so that you can really run your whole entire business from it. So you're going to create an account. You'll just click right here, create your V2 Home Hub account. You just need to do an email and then give it a password, and then you'll log in once you get here. So what I really like about this is this opens up as my dashboard when I open up my internet, and you can see like you can work straight from here. Here's your Gmail login. Here's your MLS login. Here is like our master county calendar for trainings and whatnot. MyKW.com, your command login, and then your DocuSign login. So you really can use this, really for all things that you're doing every day in your real estate business. But specifically, I'm going to take you down here to this productivity hub. So if you click on this, this is for you guys in coaching, and it is password protected. So I'm going to put the password in the chat. The password does change every month. So if we get to a new month and you can't log in, we will be sending out the password each month with our monthly email. So the password is ignite05 exclamation point. If you want to jump in, if you can, I know some of you guys are driving, but that way you can kind of navigate it with me. So we're going to go in there. And then you can see, so this is all of our library. So if you come in here, here's our calendar. Here's a link to the video library. Here's our listing materials. Here's buyer materials, scripts. Here's the link for like tonight's class and our morning huddle. Just click on that and it will take you straight into the training at that time. So that's for any classes that are 8:30 every day, the 4 p.m. Monday class, the Thursday 5:30 class, and the only other one that's on here would be the Ignite After Dark. It does have its own link. So I'm actually going to get that added on here. But for now, this is just those other classes. Scheduling a one-to-one with us, that's right here. So that's going to take you into our Calendly link. Joining our Facebook group. So if you're not on the Facebook group, go ahead and click here and join that. So that's going to put you into the private group where we put those challenges out to you each day. We put in there, sometimes I'm like, hey, I'm looking for someone to show a house or looking for someone to do an open house. We'll communicate on there. This is just takes you back to the regular Home Hub login. Here's our marketing hub, our marketing suite, but there's lots of cool stuff on here. So tonight we're going to spend time in this contract to close. So it's going to take you down here and you can see there's pretty much any checklist that you need to get through contract to close. So I'm going to start with the buyer contract to close, and the seller contract, I'm going to flip back and forth, but it's going to be very similar with a few different things that change out. So if you come on here and you just click go, it's going to take you into the buyer contract. Actually, let's see. Do I want to do this one? Yeah. So this one is working with a buyer. So step number one is you want to send all of your documents. So that would be anything that the buyer has signed with you. So your buyer broker agreement, your buyer due diligence, your wire fraud, your affiliated business agreement, and your actual signed rep C, along with any addendums. those all need to be sent over to your transaction coordinator. So the transaction coordinators in each office, there is a different one in each office. So in South Jordan, you're using Cecilia. In Salt Lake, you're using Corey Miner. And in KW, Utah, or the Midvale office, the Fort Union office, you're using Michelle Miner. So that's who you would be sending those to. They will create your command and upload it into command, or that is something that you are able to do yourself too. So the very first thing that happens is you want to send out a welcome email to the client. We want to make sure our client gets access to everything that they've signed. So you're going to send them all the contract information. And then a scripting that I always use in contract to close is the next step is, because we don't ever want to leave them hanging, right? So they just need to they need to know what's happening next. So the next step, as well as a schedule, you're going to start scheduling the home inspection, requesting earnest money through either check or wire. We also have inside of Command, there is a cool app that they're able to use that's called Earnest. And so we want to collect the earnest money, and you can send them a link through Command where they can just click on it. It sets up their business information and they can wire the money directly to us. So that's probably the best way. And the transaction coordinators will set that up for you. Otherwise, they can wire it. We can get them wiring instructions straight into the escrow accounts, or they can also drop off a check to one of the offices, and you'll just drop that check off to the front desk. So any questions on earnest money? That's kind of a big step. So I want to make sure you guys don't have questions on that. Okay. So then day one, and I like how this breaks it down day by day. So still on day one, you are organizing all of the documents, you're double checking, you're making sure you haven't missed out on any signatures or initials or anything like that. So you're organizing those dates. The next step would be sending out what we call as the golden email. So a golden email, we do have an affiliation with an insurance company. And so this will send them, it CCs them on our insurance agent. So for their home and auto insurance, they can get a quote. And a lot of people are saving a lot of money by using our company. It's called Utah Home and Auto. So what that does is it basically just introduces them to that insurance agent, and then it allows them to start working on getting insurance for their property. So the insurance agent will handle all of it. You just are going to send that out to them. And I'll show you a copy of what that looks like when we get to the end of this. Day one, so I already mentioned this, checking missing signatures, initials, and blanks, determining whether or not there's any additional forms or disclosures that you might need. So we're talking a lot about kind of the basics, like you're going to have a REPC, obviously, but there could be additional addendums that you need. So additional addendums that maybe you wouldn't have in the negotiations could be like disclosure of interest. So maybe you are a principal on the contract, that would be an additional disclosure form. Maybe somewhere through the process, you've decided to add a spouse on there. That would be an additional document. I mean, there's so many scenarios where there could be additional forms needed. So we just want to double check it at that point and make sure that you're not missing anything. So within 4 calendar days, we are going to coordinate that earnest money and deliver it to the brokerage within 4 days, or the title company is okay as well, or you're going to do that earnest app. So there's a few different options. We do not take cash, so they cannot send any kind of cash in. If you were to have somebody give you cash, you just kind of push back and just say, hey, can you go turn it into a cashier's check? So maybe they don't have a checkbook. A lot of people don't have that anymore. They can do cashier's check too. So then you are going to coordinate with the buyer, the seller, and the other agent to begin ordering the home inspection. So we have in here, text Jeff to set up inspections. We have lots of inspectors that we can refer to you. I also use a gentleman his name is Ryan. He's awesome. You guys can use your own home inspectors if you have somebody that you've built a relationship with. A lot of you will meet Ed. He's somebody that helps us a lot in Ignite. So maybe you've met him before. He's great. Lots of great home inspectors, but typically on the buyer side, we will be the one to coordinate that. Now, when we do set that up, we need to make sure that the other agent knows, because they're going to coordinate the the timeframes and everything with the seller. So this is assuming we're working with a buyer. But if it's the flip side of that, then basically what you're doing as a listing agent is you're waiting for the buyer's agent to let you know when that home inspection is going to happen. It's very important you see that it's here on day one. So as soon as you go under contract, you really want to be starting to schedule your home inspection right away, because it could take 24, 48 hours to get a home inspector in there. And once you go under contract, most of the time you're going to have about a week to complete your home inspection and negotiate repairs. So that goes by very fast. So you really want to do it as quickly as possible. Depending how busy home inspectors are, most of the time you can get them in there, next 24 hours. But you also want to coordinate this with your buyer. So it is recommended that your buyer is going to be there with the home inspector, because you want to make sure that they're the ones that are going to be there to pay for it, number one, so they pay out of pocket. And number two, the home inspector is going to walk them through the house. It will take about an hour, and they're going to walk them through the house and show them all the ins and outs of that house. So it's very educational, like how to turn the water on, the main water to the house, how to shut the power off if they ever need to, how to shut the gas off, like emergency type things. And then also just how to run the house. Like every house has different, just different things to it. So the home inspector has spent 2 or 3 hours in the house by now. And so they're going to be able to teach your buyer about the house. So you'll hear this. I think Greg was in Ignite last month where I asked one of the brokers what their thoughts on you guys being at the home inspection. You're going to hear both sides of that. So number one, it's not a requirement that you are at the home inspection. So a lot of our brokers will say, that they prefer you not to be there just because it does create some form of liability. I prefer to be there. So I like to be there just because the buyer doesn't really know what to expect. We want to kind of hold their hand through the whole process. But when I am there, I'm very conscientious to not say too much. Like I never would say, the home inspector could say something like, oh, you need your GFCIs replaced. I would never say, oh, that's not a big deal. It's $7 at Home Depot. Don't worry about it. Or they could say, the water heater's 8 years old. It could be going out. And I could say, oh, no problem. Let's get that fixed. Like you just want to be very careful on what you say during that home inspection because you could be held liable for it. So any questions on home inspections? That usually creates some questions. And those of you that have been through them before, maybe you can tell us a little bit about real life of a home inspection, what that actually looks like. Any questions there? Okay, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on negotiating home inspections. So home inspections, so you're going to go through that. And then what it's going to look like is that home inspector is going to send you a copy of the report with photos and suggestions. And they'll also send a copy to your buyer with photos and suggestions. So what's going to happen is your buyer will probably call you and say, what do you think of the home inspection? Or what do you think we should ask to have repaired? So I always let my clients know, I give them a little script up front that says, before you do a home inspection, keep in mind it's the inspector's job to find everything that's wrong with this house. We are looking for, is this something that can be stitched up or is this something that we need to do surgery on? So it's kind of a good analogy. Like if it's something that just needs to be stitched up, maybe the buyer can do it themselves. If it's something that needs major surgery, we are going to ask the seller to fix it. So the home inspectors, when they give you these reports, they usually on the very first page are going to outline kind of critical items, usually the safety items. So they almost pull out like the top 10 things on that page one. Me as an agent, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking for those major red marked items. So when my client does ask me, I could say, well, there's standing water in the bathroom. That's a big deal. We need to get that fixed. There's, electrical, the power box is not connected correctly. That's a fire hazard. We should probably get that fixed. So I'm really looking for those major things. But what I will say to my client is you review the report and you let me know what in here is a deal killer to you. keep in mind there's going to be a huge report of things. We're looking for anything that, is major. We don't necessarily want to ask the seller to fix all these small things when there's a whole bunch of big things. So it's really up to interpretation with that buyer to determine what is a big thing, what's a small thing. So I like to ask them so I can get a feel for what their head is looking like. So this is a little bit outside of just the checklist, but negotiating the repairs. So the way that I like to negotiate repairs is we're going to have that conversation, and then I'm going to write up a list. So maybe bullet point, the top 10 things that my buyer wants to have fixed, repaired, or replaced. And typically, I'm going to write something like, hey, we found a lot of items that need to be addressed during the home inspection. Sometimes I'll type out, 20 items and make it look like it's this really big list and say, my client is willing to um, fix all of these items except for these three. So we need these three items to be addressed by the seller. So it's kind of a strategy. I'm setting them up to read this huge list of problems. And then so say it's like a whole bunch of little things, a whole bunch of big things. And then I'm going to pull out the three biggest things that my client wants. So it's like, oh, we'll fix all of this stuff, but we do want a new water heater. Or we're going to fix all these items, but we do want a new roof. So it just kind of lessens the blow a little bit. We're basically saying we're willing to take on the minor things, but here's three major things that we need handled by you. So I will do that in an email, and then I'm going to go back and forth with the other agent. So I will call the agent and I'm going to say, hey, we just finished up our home inspection. There's a lot of things on this list, but my client is okay to do most of them. What we'd like to do is we do need to have the roof inspected. We do need to have the water heater, looked at, whatever those three things are. I like to verbally negotiate at first and kind of get a feel for where they're at, but I do put it in an email and then we go back and forth. So that can take a couple days. And this is also why you don't want to butt up against the deadline of that due diligence, because it could take, maybe the seller wants to get some repair bids. Maybe they're like, we don't know if we can agree to this because we don't know how much it costs. So we need to give them a few days to be able to do their homework. And sometimes we, as a buyer's agent, want to help them do that homework. So I have a negotiation right now where somebody's asking for $25,000 for a roof, and we have three other bids that the roof will be done for $12,000. So in negotiating, it's important to know, did they pick the most expensive roofer? Are they trying to get more money out of us when they don't need to? So both sides may want to spend some time getting bids. And so I do help facilitate that, whether it be the buyer or the seller. So it's always good. You're going to want to start getting those people kind of on your team. So I have a good roofer I can call that can, look at a quote, or they can look at the home inspection for me. I have a really good handyman that can look at the inspection and give me quotes, or, a plumber that I can get into a house fairly quickly to look at something. So it's important that we have all of these people kind of on our team, and you'll start to build up those people. In the meantime, you can always talk to anybody that's in the office, ask for referrals. You can go out on your Facebook pages and say, hey, I need a really good handyman. Who do you know? And you'll get suggestions from people that have used them before. And then I just start creating a little book in my phone for contacts of multiple people that other people trust until you really get to know someone. Any questions on kind of going back and forth on repair items? Does anybody have any questions on that?
What happens if it goes over the deadline?
Good question. So as a buyer's agent, we don't ever want that to happen. It's our job to protect those dates. But if we do go over, like if we're getting close to it, say tomorrow is our due diligence deadline and we're still waiting for a plumber to get us a bid. Today, I would be working on getting an extension. So we want to pay attention to the date. We really don't want it to go over. To answer your question, if it goes over due diligence, you really are going to lose a lot of leverage in your negotiations, because the listing side, the seller side, they are sitting on pins and needles for every deadline. So if we're getting past that due diligence, they're like, "Woo, we made it past that deadline." And then if you go to them and say, hey, we need this other repair, they're less likely to do it because you've already passed that deadline. So it makes things way harder for you. Depending on how your contract is written up, if something comes up, after that deadline and we just, they just can't get over it. They're like, there's just no way I can move forward with this house. You still can back them out on the next deadline, which is finance and appraisal deadline. But it's just best for negotiations to get everything done well in advance of that deadline. Good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on just kind of the inspection piece and how to present those repairs? Okay, so then what's going to happen is how do we get this in writing? So now we've agreed back and forth and it takes a couple days. We've agreed, that we've asked for 5 things and they're only going to fix 3 things, but we're all in agreement. Now we need to put it in writing so everybody can sign it. So I'm just going to show you really quickly what this form looks like. You do want to use, it's called the resolution to due diligence form. This isn't a form that you want to go back and forth on. So this is literally the resolution. It's the final form. You're going to come in here to your legacy forms and you can type in the word due diligence would work. Right here, this resolution of due diligence. And so there's a few ways that you can come to a resolution. So you're going to fill out the top like normal. Several ways that this can be handled. So number 1, the seller could agree to give them more towards closing costs. So maybe you haven't asked for closing costs and you need a new roof and it's going to be $10,000. We could say, you know what, the buyer is willing to fix the roof if you contribute $10,000 towards closing. Limitations to how much closing costs, how much the lender is going to allow the seller to pay. So it may not be that you can just add more. So if you already have $10,000 and you want another $10,000, that may not be the best solution. Talk to your lenders and kind of get a feel for what that top dollar amount is that the seller can pay. The next way you can do it is you can reduce the purchase price. So say that they are like, yeah, we've agreed all these repairs are going to cost $15,000 and the buyer's willing to make the repairs themselves, but they want you to reduce the price by $15,000. That's something you can do here. Or you can say, we've agreed, number 3, that the seller is going to make all of these repairs before closing, and then you can outline them here. So 1, 2, 3, whatever those repairs are, you can just type them up. Things that I would suggest as they are doing repairs when you represent a buyer is I would say, say it is a water heater. So we want the water heater to be, maybe it's fixed, or maybe it is inspected, or maybe it's replaced. At the end of anything I'm doing like that, I will say by a licensed professional and licensed plumber. Because anybody, you and I can go in there and replace a water heater. And I can tell you right now, it would be a disaster if I did it, but people will try. Or, they want to fix their electrical, or, they're going to hop up on the roof and they're going to start fixing shingles. Like anybody can do it. We want to make sure it's done right. So I do always hold their feet to the fire with that and say, I want a professional licensed plumber, professional licensed roofer, professional licensed electrician. So any of those trades where these people are licensed, we want it to be fixed by a licensed person. So you would just type that up in here. Any questions on these 3 sections of this form? Okay. And it's okay if you don't have questions on these because maybe you haven't seen it, so you don't even know what questions to ask. Some things that will come up during this is a buyer cannot get cash out of the transaction. So maybe your buyer is going to say, yeah, I'll fix everything, but I want $10,000 cash to do it. They cannot get cash out of the deal. So the way that they get the money is easier to do closing costs. So if your buyer was paying their own closing costs for $10,000, that would be a reason to say, hey, seller, if you pay my closing costs, then the buyer can keep their cash and use it towards repairs. When you're lowering the purchase price, that again does not give the buyer cash to make the repairs. So if a roof is needing to be done and your buyer doesn't have money, reducing the price is not going to help them get that repaired. So that's kind of the thinking behind these 3 sections in negotiating repairs. But this is a big one that people get stuck on. I also really remind my seller. So on the seller side, when I get a list of repairs, keep in mind that regardless of what they choose to do, you can have a super stubborn seller that's like, my house is great, I'm not going to fix anything. I always encourage them, keep in mind this is a professional home inspector. And if this buyer has asked for it, any other buyer's probably going to ask for it. So we need to come to some kind of resolution on this. Otherwise, the buyer can cancel, they can get their earnest money back, and the seller is starting all the way over. Same thing with a buyer. So if it gets really sticky and they're like, if they don't fix these 20 things that I'm asking for, I'm canceling. You want to help prepare them that any seller, any home is not going to be open to making all of those repairs. So again, I try to put them in the mindset of, what's a deal killer for you? Like, what can you not live with if we don't get fixed? So I never set them up for, no matter what's on this inspection report, I'm going to negotiate it for you, because it's not going to happen. So I really do try to keep these to, 3, 5 items, big items. There will be houses that, you're going to have lists of things that you need repaired. And maybe it's just not the house for them if that's the case. But this gets a little bit tricky, and this is one of our first, it's really our second kind of negotiation point, is really coming to a solution on repairs. So then you'll just finish this out. It basically says that the buyer can cancel the REPC, earnest money can be resent back. Buyer is going to waive their due diligence period if the seller agrees to it, or buyer's not going to waive their due diligence. So you're going to send this over, you're going to get the buyer to sign it, and then you're going to get the seller to sign it, and then you just continue moving to the next step. Questions on that? Okay. So also back to day 1, you do want to notify the lender, and it says here to order the appraisal as soon as possible. We're going to pump the brakes on this a little bit. So if we're doing a home inspection, I do get the lender all the information, but I tell them, please hold off on the appraisal until we get through the inspection. Why do you think I would want to slow the appraisal down a little bit? Any thoughts on that? Okay, the reason I would want to slow them down is I don't want my buyer to pay $600 for a home inspection and the appraisal's already been ordered and done for $700, and then we back out on inspections. So I'm trying to protect my buyer's money at all costs. That again is another reason why you want to order the home inspection on day 1. If we hold off on the inspection for 5 or 6 days, we're also holding off on the appraisal for 5 or 6 days. And now we've taken 5 or 6 days from the lender to be able to do their job. So usually at the day of the inspection, what I'm doing is, so I walk through, I do the home inspection, and then I'm going to say to my client, is there anything here that is a deal killer? And they're like, yes, if they do not replace this roof, I'm not buying this house. I will call the lender and say, okay, we do have an issue. I need to negotiate, continue holding off on the appraisal. Or at that home inspection, if they're like, no, everything looks great. I mean, yeah, I'd love it if they'd, fix the fence or something, but it's not a big deal if they don't. I'll do it. I'll call the lender and say, okay, you're free to order the appraisal now, because I want to give them as much time as possible. But I don't like to do both on day 1. I know this says day 1, but I really want to get through my home inspection before the appraisal is ordered. And that's the reason why I don't want them, if they're going to back out on inspection, to have to pay that extra $700 for an appraisal. Okay, give a call or person start chatting about reviews. You're asking for reviews and referrals through the whole process. Usually at points when it's high, people are excited, like going under contract. I start letting them know, hey, it's been so fun working with you. I'd love to have another client just like you. Now that we've got you under contract, I'd love to help someone else. Is there anybody else you know? Or, starting to get those reviews at those high points. If it's a super stressful point, I'm not going to start asking them for reviews. But just kind of think about that all through the process of asking for reviews and referrals. Requesting HOA documents, CC&Rs, etc. So when we receive our seller's disclosures from the seller side and we represent the buyer, HOA documents, CC&Rs will all be included. So we want to make sure that our buyer has a chance to review those. Things that you're looking for, and just so you know, HOAs and CC&Rs are hundreds of pages long. So I do not read them. I give them over to the buyer and I expect the buyer to read them or ask if they have specific questions. So HOA or CC&Rs, things that would come up, maybe they have like a dog breed restriction, or your client wants to paint the house a different color, or they want to put up a fence where there's no fence. If there's red flags like that, then I'm telling them we need to check with the HOA during our due diligence to make sure you can do all of that stuff. And we can just give them a phone call. But I give them the documents to review. Otherwise, those kind of questions that come up, I just call the HOA and ask them. Day one, we're also sending the REPC, any addendums to all parties involved. So all parties involved are going to be the lender, the title company, the co-op agent, and the other side's title company. So that could be the seller's title company or the buyer's, depending which side you're on. And their agent, and then the other party in here is going to be command. So we do also want to make sure that the office gets a copy of everything, and the way that they get a copy of everything is by you submitting it into command. So when you think all parties, you're both agents, lender, title, and the office. Those are kind of the main parties in a transaction. So they get a copy of everything. And this says here with a welcome email, there is a template that you can make, or the transaction coordinators have templates that they use. Obtain the earnest money. We've already talked about that. Reviewing and receiving the PR immediately. So as part of the seller's disclosures, they are going to send you over a copy of a title report. We want to review that. And if you don't know what a title report looks like, or you're not quite sure what to look for, definitely get with a title company and they will explain to you how that works. They also have kind of a 1-page in there of, the 10 things that you should be looking for, in addition to the 20 other, well, it's not quite 20 pages, but it's long. It's a big document. And so if you don't know what you're looking for, it will be confusing. But they do have kind of just a glance here, make sure there's no liens on the property. Most title companies are going to do that for you, but we are responsible for it. So the title company, like we work with Real Advantage Title, they review it, and in their email, they will say, checked for liens, no issues whatsoever, one mortgage, one homeowner, everything looks great. Or they'll say, hey, we checked the title, here's the report, and we're concerned about this, this, and this. But just so you know, it's our responsibility to make sure that that is good, even though the title company is working on that. We just don't want the buyer to move forward if there's any liens that we're not happy with. Record all the deadlines in Google Calendar. So that is something we want to get really used to using our calendar. So in the calendar, who's included in that is myself and my buyer, so that they are aware of these deadlines. It's very important. Our job literally is to watch deadlines. So if we miss the earnest money deadline, we're in trouble. If we miss the due diligence, we're going to be in trouble. Seller disclosures, financing and appraisal. There's something like 13 deadlines inside of a REPC. So even though we only fill out these 4 deadlines, there really are like 13 of them. So you want to really understand the deadlines that are in there and what we are responsible for. So putting them in your calendar and in your opportunities tab in the command system is going to be very helpful for you to stay on. Yeah, I'll gonna hold what I was going to say till the end. Submitting your commissions tab in command. So this is not a command class. I'm not going to teach you how to do that today. But there is a class that's taught by your market center administrators called Prep to Get Paid. And that is going to teach you how to submit your commission request in command. And we do that the day that we get the REPC. So the day that we start making our tab in the opportunities in command, we are going to start submitting how we're going to get paid. So just so you know, that does happen on day one. It can change throughout the process. So that's fine if, you know, the price changes or you give a credit or something, it can all change, but we do need to submit it to the office within 24 hours of getting it signed. So ordering a home warranty. So I do like the company Silverback. There's plenty of other companies. You don't have to use these people. We have Ibex in our office. We have Silverback. We have a couple other ones. You guys are going to build relationships with these people. So you don't have to use the ones that we refer to you, but you will get to know them because they come into the office. So that's another one of those things that you're kind of trusting other agents to say, don't use this company, use this company. So we have good referrals. Analyzing the deal for any pitfalls. So we've kind of talked a lot about that, but you're really just kind of trying to always think one step ahead, right? What could happen? 1 week into the process, we are now working on home inspections and now we're checking in with the lender. Does everything look good? Are there any issues? Is there anything you're waiting from the buyer? So that's really how we can help the lender, because during this whole process, the lender is asking the buyer for specific documents. You know, they've pre-qualified them, but now maybe they need an updated pay stub or they need their credit card on file to order the appraisal. There's a lot of little things that the lenders need from our buyers. And sometimes our buyers drag their feet. So I'm just checking in, like, is there anything you need help with? And they're like, yeah, I can't get a hold of the buyer. Then I can help by reaching out and saying, hey, the lender needs you to move quickly and we can't move forward until you do it. Something like that. Checking in with title, again, just making sure there's no problems. You know, you've gotten a title report by now. Maybe there was something that came up. You want to make sure that it's been taken care of. This is kind of talking about inspections. We've talked a lot about that, how the inspection is going to work. Midway through the process, you do want to kind of start thinking about getting a closing gift ready. You also want to, this is what I call surprise and delight. So several times through the transaction, I want my clients to have a really good experience. So not only am I preparing for the closing gift, but going under contract, I maybe have already sent a gift to them that says, congratulations, we're under contract. I like to send something like chips and salsa, like a cute little basket to their work, with the intention that somebody will say, well, who brought that in? And they're going to say, oh, my realtor had it delivered. So I'm looking for referrals, right? So anywhere you can surprise and delight. So sending a thank you note midway through. Hey, we're thinking of you. Sending out, getting them prepared to maybe go out for the night for the home inspection. Sometimes people don't like to leave their house. You're like, hey, let the home inspector come in. He's going to be there for 3 hours. Here's a movie ticket on me. Go see a movie, go to dinner. But start thinking of little ways that you can kind of stand out and make this process fun for them. So that's kind of the idea of gifting and sending out thank you notes. Starting to provide them with moving checklists. We do have moving checklists in our guides that are going to, you know, remind them of things that they can do. I don't like them to start moving right away. And so this is, you know, this is for both buyer and seller, because if something happens in the deal 3 weeks in and they've packed everything up and they're ready to go and then it cancels, we have to start over. They're now living in boxes. So I do usually wait till just a couple weeks before closing to do that. During the appraisal. So the appraisal is going to be another time that you will be negotiating. So as a buyer's agent, the lender is going to order the appraisal. And so you're just basically waiting for that to come in. Your lender is going to send, typically will send you a copy of it or your buyer a copy of it or both. But either way, you will be notified that the value is sufficient and is in as is condition and move forward. So what that means, as long as it's sufficient as is, we're good to move forward. Sometimes you're going to get a notification, and I'm seeing more of these right now where the appraisal came in low and or there's some kind of a repair that's going to have to be made. So you're going to see that with FHA and VA and appraisals. They do an additional kind of like a safety inspection to make sure that the home is going to, you know, be nice and safe for them. So repairs could come up again, or the value could come up. So if there's a problem with the appraisal, we are renegotiating. So we're renegotiating either, you know, say it's $10,000 low. Who's going to come up with this $10,000? Is the buyer? Do they have cash to do it? Is the seller willing to come down on price? Do we need to renegotiate closing costs? Do we need to fight the appraisal? It's pretty challenging to fight an appraisal, but it can be done. So those are kind of the options if you have trouble with your appraisal. But again, making sure that you have enough time to get the appraisal, get it back, and negotiate if there's any issues that come up during appraisal. If you have to do something with your appraisal, so say that now you have to lower the price, you're just going to use a blank addendum to do that. So once you go back and forth and you figure out what's going to be done, you would put that in a blank addendum that just says purchase price to be whatever the new price is. Or, you may have to adjust closing costs. You can do all of those adjustments on a blank addendum. Any questions on appraisal? I feel like that was so fast explaining appraisal, but there's not much that happens. It either comes in at value or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we're just, can take a week or so to negotiate that. During the process, you're also continuing to check in with loan updates throughout the whole process. I'm reminding my buyer not to do anything with their credit. So during the buyer consultation, I'll set them up to just let them know during this process, you're now pre-approved. Do not mess with your credit. I have several stories, not a ton, but a good handful of pretty bad stories where my client, we did the home inspection and they show up with a brand new car. And I'm just like, oh no, why did you buy a brand new car in the middle of this process? It literally took them from being able to buy a house to not being able to buy a house. So they get excited. They think that it's done. They go do their things with their credit. They go buy furniture. They go do all of that stuff. So I just remind the buyer along the process that we're still working on their loan. So don't do anything. So I'm checking in, just making sure with the lender and the buyer to get loan updates. Before you're now moving, kind of crossing over to getting into closing a couple weeks in, you want to verify that you have all the contracts and all the addendums, and they have also been given to all the parties that need to receive a copy of that. So now you've negotiated an inspection. There could be an inspection addendum that everybody needs a copy of. You've had the appraisal. Maybe you've negotiated the appraisal now, so there could be another document there. There has been many times, and it happens quite often, where you'll get to closing and the title company will have the wrong price. Or even worse, the lender has the wrong price and they've processed the loan at the wrong price. And you get to closing and you're like, no, no, no. And you're like, it was on addendum 4, I raised the price or I lowered the price, because it has to go back through underwriting. So you never want that to happen. So it's very important that anything that's signed, everybody gets a copy of it. Everybody. Day 21, you are checking with the lender to get the final plan on closing. So just so you know, even if you get, a lot of them have automated systems that will send you, hey, we have a conditional loan approval, or hey, we have loan approval. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready to close today. That means that everything's been approved from the underwriter and now they have to order documents, and then you have to schedule closing. So you could even schedule closing in the process in the middle of this, but those documents aren't ready. So we may have to change the closing, or the documents are ready, but you can't get into the title company. So you're really facilitating and navigating several people's schedules. So you just want to stay on top of it. I've had agents tell me, like, I'm not really sure where the loan is and I don't want to bug the lender. You want to bug the lender. So don't ever feel like you're bugging people. You really cannot over communicate enough when it comes to this. So if you talked to the lender yesterday and you're still not quite sure what's going on, call them again today. It's okay. They'd rather you over communicate than under communicate. Same thing with those addendums, like, okay, everything's going good. You have the price at $459, right? And they're like, I have it at $465. So all those touches with them, all that communication is going to help you avoid any mistakes that could be made at closing. As soon as we get clear to close, so you've seen the memes of the people jumping up and down because an agent gets a clear to close. That basically means documents are being ordered and you can go ahead and schedule that closing and start preparing your buyer for that. We do have trainings where we go into the title company and we will do mock closings. I don't know when the next one is, but I'll let you know. But for now, the title companies, the ones that we work with, Real Advantage Title, they are willing to sit down with you and do a mock closing. So you know exactly what closing is going to look like if you've never seen one before. But by the time we get to closing, everything really should be good. So it's a very exciting meeting. You go in there, all the documents will be there. There's not a whole lot for you to do other than be there for moral support. And the title companies usually say really nice things about you, like, oh my gosh, you have such a great agent. It is required by law that you are at closing. It is required that you review the settlement statements and you show up to closing. So if you cannot be at your closing, you're on vacation or something like that, please let us know. We will make sure that somebody is there and at least that somebody has reviewed those documents. So that is kind of a big thing you need to be aware of. So you're scheduling closing with the buyer, you're scheduling with the title company and yourself. And most of the time, really good lenders, they want to be at closing too. So the preferred lenders we work with, they all show up to closing. They are not required to be there. So just as a courtesy, I would just say, hey, did you want to be at closing with us? We're looking at closing on Wednesday. So now you have a fourth person you need to schedule times with. So the last couple of weeks, it gets a little bit crazy, just kind of coordinating everything, but you're going to book that appointment. 3 days before closing, you are going to receive that settlement statement. So it is also required that the buyer acknowledges the closing disclosure 3 days before closing. So very important that you're having this conversation with the lender as well. Like, hey, has the CD gone out? You're going to hear people say that. Has the CD gone out? And what that means is the closing disclosure has been sent to the buyer for review. Usually we are rushing this, or it kind of feels like it. So I'm asking if it's been sent. I want the lender to let me know, because what will happen is they will send it out and the buyer has to acknowledge it. And if the buyer doesn't acknowledge it that day, the 3 days starts over. So it's very important. That's why I'm asking, hey, has the CD gone out? And then I text the buyer or call the buyer and just say, hey, you've just received a copy of your settlement disclosure. I need you to acknowledge it. And they jump online. It's usually like a DocuSign. They click through it, but it has to be acknowledged for day 1 to start. And then you have to wait for day 2 and day 3 before you can actually close. So if this doesn't get acknowledged in the time that it needs to, it could push your closing out, and that could also cause you to go over a deadline. So that's the 3 days before closing is very important. You do want to arrange a final walkthrough, so taking your buyer through the house. And this is the point of this is really to make sure that the house is in the same condition it was, to make sure that they left the items they agreed to leave. During this time, a lot of times the fridge will be gone and you're like, what? You were supposed to leave the fridge, or a washer and dryer will be gone. And it's like, oh my gosh, we need the washer and dryer back. We want to do this before closing. If you go to closing and you don't do the walkthrough and everything's funded and recorded, and then the buyer goes to the house and they're like, where's the fridge? Where's the washer and dryer? The seller's going to say, oh, we already moved out, sorry. And this is where agents get stuck on the hook to buy appliances. So very important that included items, you can see what's included, make sure that it's still there. And then also what you're looking for is any repairs that they agreed to. We want to make sure they are repaired to the buyer's standards or to the standards that you put in place. So making sure, that the plumber actually did something, maybe you've got a copy of the invoice. And if you're doing it a week before closing, it will give you time to get anything fixed that maybe isn't done before you get to closing. So that's the whole purpose of that final walkthrough. And usually your buyer's excited. They want to measure rooms and things like that. Getting a copy of the home warranty. So if you are, depending how you wrote that contract, it could say that it's being ordered by the buyer and paid for by the seller. So you want to make sure that you guys have ordered the home warranty and sent the invoice to the seller's title company. That's just making sure it's going to get paid by the right person. So a lot of times the title company will order it for you, but just make sure you know that it has been ordered. And you make sure that, whoever's supposed to be paying for it is paying for it. Also, you want to verify that the buyer knows exactly how much money they need to bring in, confirm their closing costs, make sure they know what their down payment is. A lot of this really for me is I ask the lender, I just say, hey, does the client, do they have their final numbers? Do they have closing instructions? Do they know what to do? And most of the time the lender has handled this. but you just don't want to get to closing and the buyer's like, I don't even know what my down payment is, right? Like that would be a problem. So just a few days before closing, make sure that they know everything. And then starting to set up their expectations as far as being able to move in, moving their belongings in. You're coordinating that with the other side. So like scheduling movers, sometimes they think you're going to closing on Friday and you're going to hand them the keys. That's not the case. It takes 24 to 48 hours for them to fund and record and for you to give them access to the property. So just you want to be very clear on that because you don't want somebody thinking that they're moving in on Saturday and they don't get their keys till Monday. That becomes a real big disappointment at the end. So a few days before closing, start scheduling all of that. When is the seller going to be out? When is the movers coming? Things like that. Preparing your closing gift. So I do always like to take a closing gift to the settlement or the closing table. You get to decide what that is. There's no standard with that. Suggestions. I love Neater's gift baskets. I have somebody that creates kind of custom gift baskets for me. I've made my own gift baskets, could be a beautiful bottle of wine. Like, know your client. It can either be very consistent with every single client or you can custom make it. It's your personality, whatever you want to throw in there. It's your experience. But I do like to give closing gifts. People really like that. Complete your walkthrough. We've already talked about that. You're going to attend the closing. Basically, you're not doing a whole lot at the closing. The title company will give you a copy of the settlement statement to review. But remember, 3 days before, you've already reviewed it, and so has the buyer. So there shouldn't be any surprises on numbers or anything. They just go through it and have them sign it. Takes about 45 minutes or an hour for a closing, just so you're aware. The buyers take longer because they have more documents to sign than a seller. What else have I not covered here? The key handoff. So you're coordinating that with the other agent, how you're going to get the key. You will receive after closing. So that next day, the title company is either going to text you, email you, call you, letting you know that, hey, everything's funded and recorded. And then you get to notify the buyer. So great title companies that we work with. I'm sure they'd love to make that call, but they don't. They let you do it, which is always exciting to be able to call your buyer and, congratulations, you own the home, or the seller, congratulations, your home is sold. Either way, you'll be the one notifying them. Delivering keys to your new buyer, you're going to coordinate that with the buyer. After closing, you're going to want to send another congratulations card. You're going to want to watch your emails. Just make sure your commission check is correct. Make sure your commission tab is set up correctly. So again, if you had any changes on pricing or closing costs or anything, make sure you make that adjustment or your check will be wrong. And just so you know, we do direct deposit as long as the offices have that for you. Once the check's received, I think it has to be in the office by noon. They'll direct deposit it the same day. If it's afternoon, you'll see it in your account the following day. So that does happen very quickly. And then one last thing to remember. So after you've closed, you want to update everything in command. So this happens a lot where you are either going to help someone buy a home or sell a home, but you forget to change their address. You forget to change their smart plans. So take some time after closing to update your database, basically, and making sure that everything's correct with all the new property information. Asking for referrals, asking them, I always like to say, I'm going to miss you. You become really good friends with your clients because you're with them several days a week for, 2 months or so. So the way that I ask for a referral is I just say something like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss hanging out with you this week. Who do you know that's like you that I can help next? I say it's something like that. Like, I'm going to be so bored without you. Can you hand me another client? Sort of thing. So always ask for referrals. But that's basically the process A to Z of contract to close. So what questions do you have on that? Anything you can think of that you are unsure of how it goes down during the transaction? Or anything you've heard about?
It's just basically communication, negotiation, and deadlines, kind of, right? It's like kind of like a major summary of kind of
Yep.
what you were saying. So I think you
Yep.
explained it really good.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, so that really is like the checklist form. You're going to see there's a buyer checklist, there's a seller checklist. This is my commercial for transaction coordinators. So what I see happen that I don't like to see happen is you will get a client and you will kind of babysit the deal, for a lack of better term. You're going to babysit this deal. You're going to be the one making the calls. You're going to be the one sending the email. You're going to be the one organizing the paperwork. And I will see people get a client, and for 45 days, they're doing nothing else but babysitting this contract. And then at the end of the 45 days, you're like, uh-oh, I don't have any more clients. Now I'm out of work again. And then you have to build that back up. So I always tell people it takes me an hour to go through the checklist of what has to be done. Can you imagine how many hours it actually takes to get that done? So transaction coordinators, you all have them in every office. They charge around $350 at the time of closing. So I do like to say, you know, it's very important that this is someone on your team. You want to be able to use them. They are a second set of eyes, and you pay them hundreds of dollars while you're out there making thousands of dollars. So keep that in mind. I can tell you a real story of myself where I did several deals one year, and I looked at my finances during taxes and I was like, man, I could save $10,000 if I didn't have a transaction coordinator. So I basically said, I'm going to do this on my own. And my business went way down because I was babysitting those transactions. So I just really like to emphasize that, because yes, you need to know the process. Yes, you're responsible for it, but you personally don't have to do all of that. So use a transaction coordinator to do it. If I could require it, I would. But that's not something I can do. I highly suggest that you use a transaction coordinator. Get to know them. They're in your offices. They do a lot of teaching for us. But honestly, they save you so much time, and in the end, money too. Because your job at this point really should be out there talking to people, getting more deals. So I'm still able to do deals, and I'm with you guys like, you know, full time every single day. When I get a deal, I literally get something under contract and I put it on my transaction coordinator's desk, and I don't see it, hear it. I don't go into command. I don't send one email. I do nothing so that I can be available for you guys and go get more deals. So that's what I suggest for you guys, is that you're just pass it off, let the transaction coordinator do everything I just taught you, and you go out and get more business. So commercial over. But any questions on transaction coordinators? Or anything else?
I do got a comment. If you run into the breed restriction on the whole HOA thing, it's probably going to be because of a pit bull type dog. Just tell them it's a Staffordshire Terrier, American Staffordshire Terrier. It's a cheat code, and they can't disprove it. Okay.
Thanks, Cody.
No problem at all.
Great advice. That's so funny. I live in an HOA, and I am open. They were like, you can't have that dog. You can't have that dog. They thought my dog was a pit bull, which it wasn't. And yeah, people are so funny about breeds. So thanks,
So
Cody.
I did him dirty. I went and got blood work done, and through the AKC doesn't recognize pit bulls, only Staffordshire Terriers, and that's how I was able to get on a whole bunch of craziness.
Hopefully you guys heard him. I think I lost him. I couldn't hear him.
Yeah, it's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah. But yes, good advice. Things like that come up during a real estate transaction for sure. Any other questions or comments tonight?
Just
Okay.
thank you, and you're fabulous, Teri. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Cody. I appreciate that. Okay, I hope to see you guys either tomorrow on our call, or that would be all that we have tomorrow, but I'm available if you need help with anything. Otherwise, have a great weekend and see you guys next week, if not tomorrow.
Yep. See you tomorrow in the morning.
Okay, have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you, Teri.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.